A huge night for Mark Vientos, a solid start from Clay Holmes, and the New York Mets found their way to their first series victory since the trade deadline.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season's around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Well, the New York Mets are all fixed. It just took a great start for Nolan McLean in his MLB debut on Saturday, and that just changed the momentum of the season. The Mets build on that on Sunday. They win the series, and now there's no more problems. It's all good. We can't say that right now. It's obviously too soon to believe that all the problems have been fixed. But boy, does it feel a lot better to be a Mets fan right now than it did 48 hours ago. And maybe this is a turning point. You never know. You know, when I was last year in Washington, D.C. with my dad for his birthday, and we watched the Mets sweep the Nationals, I remember doing shows in the parking garage under our hotel. And I was saying, you know, if there was a turnaround for the Mets this season, at the time they were whatever it was, still however many games under 500, 8 games under 500 or whatever it was going into that London series. I said, you know, if it was going to happen, you'd sweep the Nationals like this. You'd see the rotation start to stabilize, the lineup start to pick it up. You go into London, you'd hold your own against the Phillies, you come home and you go for a run, and the Mets did that. So it's too early to tell if this really is the momentum shift of a series that it feels like at this very moment. But the Mets are checking the boxes that you want to see. And that was a very promising thing for them to go up against not just any team. The Seattle Mariners are in a tough division battle with the Houston Astros right now in the AL West. This is a very good baseball team. You went up against 3 quality starting pitchers, and you got the job done. So great job for the Mets in this series. And I also think the Little League Classic, for one, such a cool event. You know, I guess I haven't really been as keyed in on it since the Mets last played in it in 2018, and that was before I was doing Locked On Mets. So maybe I even then wasn't as locked into what was going on with the Mets during that event. But to see it all play out, see all the videos circulating on social media and on YouTube and all these different things, to see the Mets engaging with these kids, I really think, as I talked about even on yesterday's show, that this can be something that helps turn the momentum, that gets the Mets out of their heads. Because while the lineup had struggles and the bullpen eventually faltered, and we'll talk about the starting rotation in the next segment a little bit more, because I think that was still the biggest issue that this team has been going through. The biggest roadblock has been this rotation since Kodai Senga went down in the middle of June. You know, while all those problems are specific to this team and guys underperforming and everything else, they compound against each other. And, you know, ultimately you just get into this place as a struggling baseball team in a huge market where it could snowball on you and you're just not having fun. Sunday's events were the epitome of fun. You know, you watch it. I felt myself reminiscing and thinking back to, I mean, I never did the Little League World Series, but I was part of the Little League All-Stars and stuff when I was a kid. And then I did travel baseball, and just the vibes of being at a baseball tournament where you're a kid and you're just meeting these kids from across the country or across this state in Florida where I play, wherever it was. And you're talking to different teams, you're trading pins, you're having a good time. If the facilities, like we saw some of the Mets, you know, with the ping pong and all, it's just such a fun atmosphere where it's just kids being kids. And a lot of the Mets talked about, you know, bouncing, these conversations with these kids, bouncing ideas off them. And, you know, what do you guys do when you're hitting? It's like see ball, hit ball, how simple it can be. And I think for a Mets team that's been pressing for a long time, this was the perfect event at the perfect time off the heels of Nolan McLean, who started the turn of momentum. And then you win a baseball game and you win it in this super fun environment where things aren't so serious and there's just not that pressure. I think sometimes for the Mets, those jerseys get so heavy, and these guys did not have to feel that at all whatsoever on Sunday. I think the perfect example of it, you have a guy, Mark Vientos, who just has not been able to get going all season. He's had pockets of good play, good series here, a good game there, whatever it is, but he has largely struggled this season. He had himself a great game in the Little League Classic. He was part of two different rallies, the two rallies that led the Mets to this victory. In the bottom of the second inning, you saw the Mets record 4 straight hits and a sacrifice fly for the first 5 batters in that inning. So 5 successful plate appearances. It was a single by Pete Alonso that led it off. Jeff McNeil ended up having a single as well. Francisco Alvarez, who unfortunately we got to talk about in the final segment because he exited this game with a thumb injury, but he stayed hot, doubled in Alonso. Brett Beatty got a base hit to drive in McNeil, and then Vientos crushed one to deep center field. That one stayed in the yard, but it was a sacrifice fly. In the bottom of the 5th inning, he hit one that did not stay in the yard. Another rally for the Mets where Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez each single, and Vientos comes up with 2 outs and crushes a 3-run homer to the opposite field. When Vientos starts hitting home runs to right field, that's when you know he's feeling good. Only his 8th home run of the season. Who knows if this can really get Vientos going, but a very solid day. He goes 2 for 3 as he had a single as well in the game with 4 RBIs. He might not get enough playing time to really build off this. We really don't know that position for the Mets. Third base DH with Vientos, Mauricio Beatty. It is a puzzle right now about who's going to play and who is going to be able to maybe grab more of a role because of playing well. And all these guys have had little flashes, but for Vientos, a guy that's such an ignitable bat, definitely a really good sign for him. After that, you had Cedric Mullins double into the right field corner, and then Francisco Lindor doubled, fly ball that Julio Rodriguez probably should have caught, but it drops for a double and the Mets' 7th run of the game. So really good game for the Mets offensively, 14 hits. They went 5 for 15 with runners in scoring position. Everybody in the starting lineup got at least 1 hit except for Juan Soto, but Soto walked 3 times. And again, a huge day for Francisco Alvarez before he went down with the injury. He went 3 for 4 with 2 doubles, including a hustle double in the 7th inning, which led to that injury. And man, is it unfortunate on multiple fronts. For one, you're winning 7-3. Not that you want to tell a guy not to hustle, but it's just such an unfortunate timing for an injury. Not at a moment where he had to be going for that double. And the other thing is, for a guy that's had hand injuries, someone needs to teach this guy to slide with his feet, because he dives head first in the second base, jams his hand, and now who knows what's going to happen again. We'll talk about that in the final segment. But on the pitching side of things, Clay Holmes had a really good start. I talked about this on yesterday's show, how Nolan McLean maybe put a little blueprint out there for what Clay Holmes can do, because McLean, a pitcher that thrives on his sinker sweeper combo, Clay Holmes, a pitcher that thrives on his sinker sweeper combo. And we saw that in this game. Holmes looked the best he has in months. I mean, really was in complete command. He worked around just 1 base runner in each of the first 3 innings. The 4th inning, he should have worked around only 1 base runner in the inning. A leadoff double by Julio Rodriguez, because he then got a strikeout and a ground out before he sawed off Jorge Polanco, who hit this knuckler of a line drive. And it just sort of takes a left turn when Lindor has it measured and just gets away from, he deflects it, isn't able to make the catch. They're not ruled an error, but Lindor would tell you he's got to make that catch. Just a really tough read for him. Very similar to Julio Rodriguez going through some struggles. I think playing in that ballpark, not your typical major league ballpark. Maybe it led to some different sight lines. Who knows? But that's a play that should have been made. And if it was, Clay Holmes might have got through 6 innings, because instead he had to really labor through that 4th inning. The only inning that he did have to labor through, added 15 pitches to his total for the day. He ends up giving up a single and walks the bases loaded after that, before he starts off the 9-hitter Cole Young with a 3-0 count. Finds the zone, just a get-me-over pitch to get back into the count, and then able to get a pop-up to get out of that jam. But he goes back out there for the 5th inning against the top of the Mariners lineup and sets them down in order 1, 2, 3. So really good stuff for him in that fifth inning to bounce back after the rougher fourth. And he gets through 5, gives up 1 run, only walks 1. His last time out, I think he might have walked like 5, and he strikes out 4. So a good start for Clay Holmes. Again, if Lindor makes that catch, he doesn't even give up a run. So really solid outing for him. And also, if he makes that catch, he might have gone 6. Brooks Raley instead pitches that 6th inning, a scoreless frame for him. Reed Garrett gives up 2 in the 7th on a Cal Raleigh 2-run homer. Ryan Helsley comes on for the 8th, has a nice inning, strikes out his first 2 batters. Seems like he really found his cutter. So maybe that all of a sudden is a weapon for him. I got to look on that because I always felt like Ryan Helsley was just fastball slider. Was that just the way that they were classifying the pitch on the ESPN broadcast as a cutter instead of his slider? And was it actually the slider? Or does he typically throw a cutter that I guess I was unaware of? Yeah, I mean, he throws a cutter 1% of the time. So maybe those were cutters, and maybe just a new pitch because he doesn't have a feel for his slider right now. His average 88.9 on the slider, and the cutter was coming in around there, though. I think those are probably sliders, not cutters, but it doesn't matter. Regardless, for Ryan Helsley, he puts up a 0, which is the most important thing. And then Tyler Rogers able to finish it out with a scoreless 9. So the question is, can this series be a real momentum builder for the New York Mets? Are they going to, from this point on, be a good baseball team again? I want to talk about what I think is the most positive sign for that here in just a minute. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up and college football is not far behind. It's the perfect time to lock in your season-long more or less picks for the 2025 football season, all before week 1 kicks off. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. I've already made a few of my season-long picks. Josh Allen, more than 27.5 touchdowns. That's a prediction I feel really good about. And the flex play option is a total game changer, where even if one of your picks misses, you still have the chance to double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I would love to get there by the end of the season. Appreciate all of you. Continue to subscribe. Let's talk about this starting rotation. While the New York Mets have had a very inconsistent lineup this year, the offense has definitely gone through some rough stretches, and the same can be said for this bullpen. Both of those units contributing to what's been some really bad Mets baseball over the past couple weeks, and certainly since the middle of June. If you look at a larger stretch, I still have felt this entire time like it's been the rotation that has been the issue that has to be addressed. Not necessarily addressed at the deadline, but just something that had to be figured out internally, because when you have a bad rotation, it trickles into those other facets of your team. If your rotation isn't going well, your bullpen has more strain on it. They're going to be more taxed. They're going to be throwing more often because you're not getting length from those starters. And the bullpen shows warts. And the same thing can be said for your starting lineup, because if you're playing from behind all the time, it's just so much harder than when you're either in a tied up game or you're playing ahead. Then it's a lot easier to score runs. So I have felt this entire time like the rotation has to be the thing that gets this team back on track. That's why we spend so much time on it. And I also can tell you, the rotation really can be the end-all be-all for any season. It is very hard to overcome a bad rotation. And this is the 7th season I've covered the New York Mets on this podcast. I think it's been pretty evident that when the Mets have had a good rotation during that time period, the rotation's good, the team is good. If the rotation's bad, the team is bad. It has really been that simple. 2019, the Mets had a very rare season where they didn't have any injuries all year that year. It was DeGrom, Syndergaard, Wheeler, Matz, and then it was Vargas, and then they traded for Marcus Stroman, who replaced Vargas in that rotation, and that was it. I mean, they just had a remarkably healthy year, and they nearly made the playoffs. 2020, COVID season, you can't take much from it, but what I will tell you, that rotation with Rick Porcello and Michael Wacha was awful. Awful. and it was a bad year. 2021, first half, Jacob deGrom is an MVP candidate, and the Mets are in first place. DeGrom goes down, the rotation crumbles, and the team crumbles. Then you go to 2022. You had Max Scherzer, Chris Bassett, Carlos Carrasco had a good year. Taijuan Walker had a good year. That rotation was very solid. The Mets won 101 games. 2023, you have Scherzer and Verlander. Both of them struggle in the first half. They obviously had good stretches as well. We're still able to be flipped for a ton at the deadline, but they were not the aces you expected, and the rotation was not very good. Your team was horrible. 2024, Mets have an awesome rotation from June on in particular, and they go on that magical run. This year, before Kodai Senga goes down with that injury, the Mets had the best rotation in baseball. They also had the best record in baseball. Senga goes down, Megill and Canning follow. This rotation goes through a tailspin, as does the team. So now we look at where the Mets are at this very moment. I think the last two turns in the rotation are sort of evident of hopefully a team that is ready to turn a corner. And I'm looking at the last two turns, starting with Kodai Senga because he's the Mets ace. So you go back to Friday, August 8th against the Brewers. Kodai Senga allows 3 runs, only one of them earned, but he doesn't make it out of the 5th inning. He goes 4 1/3. The next day, you had Reed Garrett open for Frankie Montas. Montas gives up 3 runs in 3 innings pitched. And then you have Sean Manaea, who gives up 4 runs in 4 innings pitched against the Brewers. 3 bad starts against Milwaukee. I mean, not a start for Montas, but essentially one. You get swept. Then you have Clay Holmes against the Braves. Goes 3 2/3, gives up 5 runs on 6 hits and 5 walks. That was the game the Mets win because Pete Alonso and this lineup absolutely exploded when Alonso broke the record. Thought that might be a turning point for the Mets, but it wasn't a turning point for the rotation. Holmes was knocked out of the game in the 4th inning. Next day, David Peterson, the one guy that you could count on throughout all of these struggles since the middle of June, he gets shelled, gives up 6 runs on 5 hits and 5 walks in 3 1/3 innings pitched. And then you have Kodai Senga again, but Senga had a pretty solid start. He goes 5 2/3, allows 2 runs on 5 hits, 1 walk, strikes out 7. Now, the Mets still were not winning, but the rotation was getting in line. Sean Manaea goes next to open up this series against the Mariners. He gives up 4 runs on 6 hits, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. But I think what's important for Manaea in that start, he went 5 innings, and he gave up those 4 runs in the first 3 innings pitched. Put up a couple of zeros after that. The Mets, took a lead over the Mariners in the bottom of the 4th inning. Manaea goes back out for the 5th and is able to put up a 0. So I thought that was a step in the right direction for Manaea, and the bullpen blew the game. But I think if you're looking at this last turn through, for Senga and Manaea, those were positive developments. Then you get to Saturday with Nolan McLean. 5 1/3 scoreless, an awesome start. We've been talking about it for 2 days now. So exciting to see the way he was able to throw the baseball. And then he lays a blueprint for Clay Holmes to follow, and Clay Holmes goes 5 innings of 1-run ball today. So you look at this rotation, and now all of a sudden, let's imagine that Clay Holmes, for at least the rest of this month, is able to stick in this rotation. Because this whole time, while I've been campaigning for him to be pulled from this rotation since just before the deadline, this stuff has never been terrible. He's lost the feel for the strike zone at times, absolutely, but the velocity has been there. And I think when you're talking about how the Mets monitor guys, they have so many different trainers and doctors and medical team and all these different things where they really are able to evaluate these pitchers in particular, and they can evaluate arm health and how guys are bouncing back and fatigue. That's why the Mets no longer have set innings limits. Like Nolan McLean does not have a certain number he can get to where it's a shutdown point. They're going to keep monitoring him. They're going to see how he bounces back from his starts. And if he's bouncing back well and they think the arm is healthy, the Mets at this point are not going to shut a guy down just because he hits a certain amount of innings. And the same can be said for Holmes. So if Holmes can build off this start, if Nolan McLean is really this guy that can just hit the ground running, and it certainly looks like he can. And now you look at this upcoming series against the Nationals, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea lined up against a bad team. If those guys give you length, help this bullpen out, all of a sudden you're feeling a lot different about this rotation, as McLean will then open up the next series against the Braves. And the other thing is Tylor Megill is on the mend. Had a great rehab start today in Double-A. goes 3 1/3, allows 1 hit, strikes out 9. So he faced 11 batters and struck 9 of them out, got 10 of them out. Did not give up a run, got up to 55 pitches, 39 of them were strikes. So now you look at Megill and you say, well, okay, maybe Clay Holmes just has to bridge the gap to Tylor Megill. And Megill might only need a couple more rehab starts. His next time out probably can get up to 70 pitches. Next time after that, maybe it's 85. And at that point, you could call him up. I think it's more likely that he gets 5 rehab starts altogether instead of 4. I think that's more typical for what the Mets would want to do, but you never know. If he's throwing the ball really well, and he certainly has been so far, and remember, I mean, this is not a guy that is pitching for the first time this season. He was built up at one point this year. Yes, he's been shut down for a couple months now, but maybe he can finish the season strong, and maybe he only needs 2 more rehab starts. The earliest that we would see him make a start would be September 1st. I imagine his next time out will be on regular rest, so he'd pitch on Friday, maybe in Syracuse, who knows. Then goes on Wednesday, the 27th. That would lead to the earliest possible return if he just stays on regular rest for September 1st. And the Mets are going to need a spot start on August 25th. That's going to be the first game of their series against the Phillies. That'd be in front of a Kodai Senga start. And because they're about to start a stretch after this off day today on Monday, where it's 16 games in 16 days, they would actually need another starter to go ahead of Senga again. So the only issue here for the Mets is they're going to need somebody in the rotation for the 25th and the 31st. And that's going to be too soon for Tylor Megill to step into that role. That's why I had recently been, campaigning for Paul Blackburn to stick around. The Mets made that decision. We're not going to cry over spilled milk at this point. But my only question is, are they willing to make a move to bring Brandon Sproat up so that they don't have to go with the bullpen game / a Frankie Montas game or 2 to close out this month? If they're willing to do that, I'm all in on the plan that the Mets have laid out here, and that would require them to make a pitching decision at some point next week or before the game on Monday next week, whether that is cutting Ryan Stanek or if they option Reed Garrett, which I've talked about. Yes, Reed Garrett's a huge part of that bullpen, but he's had some struggles, just gave up another home run, and he has that ability to be optioned. Yes, you'd lose him for 2 weeks, but you'd also set yourself up to be able to call up Brandon Sproat. I wouldn't even be mad if the Mets decided, you know what, let's get a fresh arm. Let's option Reed Garrett on Tuesday or option him on Monday to just have that backdated as soon as possible so that you can get him back right when you get into September. And you just bring a fresh arm up for now and you play that game of cycling arms this week, whoever you can. And then Brandon Sproat, after maybe one more start, can join the rotation and make that spot start. Only thing I'm unaware of here would be how he would line up for it. Let's think here. When did Brandon Sproat pitch this week? I want to say it was Thursday, but I'm not entirely sure. So let me look really quick here. It was the 14th was the last time he pitched. So 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, he could make a start on Wednesday, and then you'd have 1, 2, 3. He'd be going. You know what? They have done this before. Here's what I'll say. Nolan McLean made a start on 4 days rest in AAA before he joined the big league rotation. If we see Brandon Sproat pitch on Tuesday this week in Syracuse, I think he makes that start on the 25th, and the Mets will figure out some kind of a roster move to get him up. And then he would just be part of the rotation. It could be a 6-man rotation. But here's where I think things are really exciting. You look at September for the Mets, all of a sudden talk about rotation depth. If they do bring up Sproat, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, definite locks to be in this rotation. Nolan McLean, I think, will be as well. You have Clay Holmes, Brandon Sproat, and Tylor Megill. So all of a sudden, you got 7 guys, and you can pick your top 6. You can get creative with the off days that you have, or maybe you piggyback some guys. You can definitely be very flexible, and then you figure out which 4 you want to roll with when you get to October, assuming the Mets do finish off this season strong. But I think this rotation is maybe starting to find some solid ground. We'll knock on wood and we'll hope, but if you see the top 3 of Peterson, Senga, and Manaea have a good series in DC, and that might lead to 2 or 3 wins against the Nationals before you get to that Braves series, I think you'll be in a really good spot moving forward. And I think that's going to trickle down to the bullpen being better and not having these issues that you've seen pop up recently. Ryan Helsley is too good of a pitcher to continue to struggle, and hopefully this good outing in the Little League Classic maybe gets him off on a good note here. You got an off day on Monday to let those guys rest. And again, if you get length out of your starters, maybe this bullpen is in a much better place and can be the unit that you expected that will really help you win a lot of games down the stretch here and into October. And then the last question mark is just the starting lineup, but I think there's a lot of positive signs going, but there's still now an injury to worry about. So that's where we're going to close out the show. What's the latest on Francisco Alvarez, and what would it mean if the Mets did lose their starting catcher? We'll close the show here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP or eyeing a long shot division winner, or maybe you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. You can take a flyer on the MVP race. Maybe you like Jaden Daniels at plus 1,000, or you can crown your champ in August. Maybe you like the Bills this year, finally getting over the hump at plus 700 to win it all. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, player game. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You get the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever going on social media. And also, you get to take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. I got this bad boy here, a signed photo of John Matlack. If you want to enter, I'm going to run this at 3 o'clock Eastern time here. I'll run the giveaway through our subtext for our Locked On Mets insider. So all you have to do is reply to a text message and enter for a chance to win. Really good odds on winning a side photo with this type of giveaway instead of putting it out to our entire audience. That is the perk of being a Locked On Mets insider. So if you want to be an insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now let's talk about Francisco Alvarez, because this is so unfortunate. This has been one of the best stretches of Francisco Alvarez's career. From my memory bank, it has been the best stretch of his career. Just so consistent offensively since coming back from Syracuse. He has been the Mets' best hitter since returning, and that's not hyperbolic. That is factual based on the stats. His OPS has been the highest since his return. For the last 30 days, no one has had a higher OPS from the New York Mets than Francisco Alvarez. In 21 games played, hitting .323, .408 on base, .645 slugs, 6 doubles, 4 home runs, a triple, 13 RBIs, 14 runs scored, had 2 doubles in the game today. He's walking at a fair clip, 9 walks to 16 strikeouts. He's also been better defensively over this stretch. He is playing like the guy that we all hoped he could be, someone who could be one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball. That is how good he has been. Now, all hope is not lost, okay, because we don't know yet what's going on with Francisco Alvarez. This might just be a minor thing. Maybe it's just a minor thumb sprain. Maybe it's nothing at all. Francisco Alvarez wanted to stay in the game. He did stay in the game after he got checked out when he dove into second base on that double. And there was still grip strength there, enough that they did not just immediately pull him. And when you see a thumb injury, if the trainer is trying to test your grip strength and there is none, immediate pull. You're not going to stay in the game. So the one positive sign is he did have some grip strength in there, but when he came into the dugout, he was still not entirely sure of himself. He wanted to play catch before he went back out there to, actually catching the game again. And Carlos Mendoza wisely said, no, we're not going to mess around with it. This is a guy that's had multiple hand injuries over the last couple of years. And even further than that, they're not even going to wait on seeing how it heals the next day. They're sending him right to New York for an MRI. So we'll see. The hope is on Monday he gets an MRI. Doc says it's all good, you're day to day, and he meets the team in DC and he doesn't even need an IL stint. Another good outcome is, okay, it's not too bad, but best case scenario is to just not do any activity with it and just let it heal for a couple of days. It's a 10-day IL stint, and hopefully it is a return off the injury list very soon after that, maybe a little bit of time in Syracuse just to make sure everything is good once he rests up for a week or two. and you get him back for the stretch run. But this team needs Francisco Alvarez because you are so much more dynamic as a lineup when you have a plus bat at the catcher spot. While Luis Torrens has had his moments this year, he's a backup catcher. He is. I know there was points where fans were clamoring for him to get the everyday role over Alvarez, but I think you could see while the Mets were running Alvy out there a bunch, even when he struggled, and why it was so important to send him down to get him right. And now that he has been right, it's just a completely different lineup when he's in there compared to Torrens. You're losing a lot, but I will say, if you want to look at the silver lining, at least you still have a good defensive catcher in Luis Torrens, who's not going to be a nothing offensively. Hayden Sanger might be, all due respect to him. He's definitely not a very good hitter, but he's also a great defender. So at least you know that you're not falling off a cliff defensively. In fact, in some regards, you might be slightly better. You are definitely falling in a pretty major way, especially based on the recent production offensively. But at this point, all I care about is that Francisco Alvarez is good to go for September and October. If we don't see him again in August, as much as that sucks, fine. Let him rest up. But you need Alvy. You need him because he really does make this team that much better. I will say there are other guys who are starting to swing it well in this lineup, and they can overcome this. Francisco Lindor clearly has gotten hot again, hitting over 300 over the last couple of weeks, 4 home runs, 4 doubles. Juan Soto has 5 home runs over his last 13 games played, OPS over 1,000 for both of those guys, Lindor and Soto. Brad Beatty has actually been very good in his last 8 games played, hitting 346, couple home runs, OPS over 900. Pete Alonso also has an OPS over 900 recently. He is tied with Francisco Lindor over the last 2 weeks when it comes to the team lead in hits. He's got 17 hits, a team leading 14 RBIs, 4 home runs. So Alonso definitely starting to be a little bit more of a threat in the box again. Starling Marte has been solid when he's in there. Cedric Mullins, the numbers say it's been pretty awful, but I think his at-bats have been pretty good and he's had some moments. Same thing with Brandon Nimmo. Jeff McNeil going through a rougher stretch when it comes to the stats, but again, I don't feel like he's given away any at-bats. I think he's still been competitive and he's been part of some rallies. Mark Vientos, big game on Sunday. We'll see. Ronnie Mauricio had a pretty good game on Saturday. So whatever you get from those guys is a big plus as well. I just think this team should be able to hit even without Francisco Alvarez. Yes, it's a big drop-off, but you still should have 8 hitters in your lineup each day that are threats in the box. And again, you hope that Alvarez comes back relatively soon after a short IL stint, or maybe he doesn't need any time on the IL at all. Luckily, you had the off day on Monday to get that thumb checked out, and that was another reason why I was like, don't even mess with it. Send him out to New York and not on the team plane to DC. Get it looked at by all the team doctors and everything, and make your decision. It's a blow, absolutely, but I don't think it's one that cripples this team. I think they still have enough bats to get by without him. It would be a much different team come playoff time, though. So if it ends up being a lot worse than we're expecting, then it's a devastating one. But my hope is the fact that he was able to still have grip strength right after it happened, the fact that he was still fighting to stay in the game, my hope is this is just a minor little injury for Alvarez. And maybe in the couple weeks he has where he is resting that thumb, go old school, baby. Put the hands up and start learning how to slide. Now, you might not want to put your hands up and slide when you're trying to go for a hustle double, but you can keep your hands out of harm's way a lot easier if you're sliding into bases than diving. Somebody needs to teach this guy to slide. It's that simple. I don't want to see him dive again for the rest of his career. And that might sound a little bit crazy, and I know he still has to dive back into bases. I don't think I've seen anybody slide into a base on a pickoff attempt, but you know what? I don't even need to see Alvarez steal. You know what? Take a little league lead for all I care and get a really good secondary because he's too important to this team. And those hands have been an issue. So, and I mean, I will say this is the first time it's been because of this. If you remember the other time, I think last year, didn't he trip? I think he tripped on the way to second base and was bracing himself that he hurt his thumb. And then this year he was, hitting in spring training on the hamate bone and broke that. So, there's been other things. It hasn't always just been diving into the base, but for a guy that has this injury history, teach the kid how to slide, please. Anyway, that's where I guess we'll close the show. On tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets, going to preview what lies ahead against the Nationals. Hopefully, we will get an update on Francisco Alvarez. It sucks because I was actually gearing up to talk about how good he's been on a segment of this show, if not doing a whole show on it at some point. And now the news on Alvy is obviously not just some positive stuff talking about how good he's been. It's about talking about his absence. But again, we'll cover a lot on tomorrow's show. I appreciate all of you tuned in today. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider and get in on that giveaway for the signed photo, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll take around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from local experts and league-wide experts that'll take you through all the games. You can check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.